Hello, everybody. Welcome to Kevin Plays Disc Golf. Today we have a playthrough and course review from Squamanagonic Disc Golf Course in Rochester, New Hampshire, and I apologize if I'm butchering the pronunciation of the course name. My name is Kevin, and I play disc golf. Building on course for this video was done on April 29th, 2025. The course originally opened in 2013. Though this is a free-to-play course, there is also police training done on site, and as a result, the course is closed on Fridays and for the entire month of November. To get to the course, if you're coming from the Spalding Turnpike, Route 16, from either direction, take exit 12 onto Route 125 south. If you're coming from the north on Route 125, keep going until the Route 16 and Spalding Turnpike intersection. From where Route 16 and 125 join, take the second right onto Oak Street. After about 1/2 mile, take the second right onto Hansonville Road. After about another 1/2 mile on the right, there is a small blue sign that marks the entrance to Squamanagonic Recreation Area. The road is a narrow dirt road and it is easy to miss. If you're coming from the south on Route 125, the best, though not great, landmark is a large used car dealership on the left. Immediately after that dealership, turn left onto Flag Road. After about 1.5 miles, the road will end. Turn right onto Hansonville Road. After about 1/4 mile, the sign and small dirt road for the Squamanagonic Recreation Area will be on your left. If you see the golf course on your right, you've gone too far on Route 125, but you can take the second left after the golf course onto Oak Street and follow the directions from the north. If you're coming from the west on Route 202, unfortunately there are not any good landmarks here either. The best one is probably Ayers Pond, which will be on your left. Then shortly after that, you'll take a sharp right onto Green Hill Road. After about 1 mile, you'll take a sharp left onto Hansonville Road. After about 1 1/4 miles, the sign and small dirt road for the Squamanagonic Recreation Area will be on your left. Once you are on the small dirt road, you will go under the sign for the Squamanagonic Sportsmen's Association. Continue to the entrance gate. The gate is set based on a timer depending on the season. I arrived at approximately 8:30 a.m. and the gate was up. Past the gate, take the right fork and the parking lot for the disc golf course will be in front of you. The park is open from 1/2 hour before sunrise to 1/2 hour after sunset, so I'm guessing the timer is based on those times, but I have not confirmed that. The spring of 2025 was unusually rainy, and as a result, the course was about as wet as you will ever see it. This did result in some boggy and marshy areas on the course that are likely to be either smaller or completely dry later in the year. That said, except for the places where I mentioned the wetness in the fairway in the playthrough, the course was in remarkably good condition. I played the longer of the two 18-hole course configurations, though I do point out where the shorter tees are on all of the holes. There's only one basket placement per hole. Trash is carry in, carry out, however you can leave it in the dumpster by the parking lot. There is a porta potty next to the main parking lot by the practice basket. The use of alcohol, drugs, and tobacco is prohibited. Dogs are allowed, however you must clean up after them. Disc golf is the primary use of this property when it is open, and in my time at the course, everyone I saw was playing disc golf. I'll have my overall review of the course at the end of the video. Be sure to post your comments as to your thoughts of what looks fun and where you think the problem areas are. As you drive into the parking lot, the start of the course will be directly in front of you and the practice basket will be on your left. The long tee for hole 1 is on the far right corner of the large concrete pad near the informational kiosk and disc golf rules sign. From here, we'll go straight to the hole 1 tee.
Hole 1 is a 296-foot par 3 dogleg left. It is a pretty severe dogleg. The basket is to the left of the utility pole off through the woods in that direction. You cannot see the basket from the tee, but there's a smaller tree lit up by the sunshine right now, and the line of the basket is a little bit to the left of that from the tee. So The main way to get to the basket is straight and then take a hard 90-degree left-hand turn. There is a short tee, which is straight up and to the right. I don't think we can see it from the footage here, but I'll point that out in editing, and we'll see how this goes. That didn't quite make it around the corner, but I think I can see the basket from where I am. Now, as we walk up the fairway a little bit, just to the right, here we can see the short tee. On the right, we can see the basket between the lit up pine tree and the tree just next to it off in the distance there. Even from the short tee, it is a pretty good dogleg right to left. I ended up near the two smaller trees off to the left of the picture. Even though I went left, I can see the basket from here. If we look just in the middle of the two trees that form an isosceles triangle with the ground at the base, we can see the basket through that gap. That's a pretty small gap. I'm gonna have to get a little bit creative here, but I think I see a way to get to the basket. Not quite what I had in mind, but I will pretend that's exactly what I wanted to do where I hit the post. Once we get up near the basket, it's pretty open here, at least within circle one. There are a couple smaller trees we need to avoid, but again, I don't have a whole lot to avoid with my upshot that bounced off the post. So we'll give our POV putt for 3. Okay, grab our disc out of the basket, and something to note here is that there is a next tee sign hanging from the bottom of the basket, which is convenient, at least good to know for later. The second hole, we can actually see the tee as we're walking up the fairway, but from here, we can take a right following the next tee sign, and the tee pad is right in front of us for hole 2. Again, something else to point out is that there are, at least so far, some nice benches. The tee pads, even the shorter ones, appear to be all these nice decorative concrete, which, as I've seen before, provide good grip in both the wet and the dry. Hole 2 is a 282-foot par 3, straight ahead. We can see the basket from the tee. It is between the two trees off in the distance that are kind of lit up. It is a straight shot. I think the better play for me is going to be to go around to the left. It looks like there is both a left and a right option, though the right option looks a little scary, but left should play into my strength. So we'll see how this goes. It does appear to be slightly downhill, but mostly level here. Something else I will point out is that the red tee is off to the right of where we are, and you can see it from the tees if we just scroll a little bit to our right. We can see the short tee right there in front of us by that bench. Come on back, miss it, miss it. Well, that was almost going to be good. All right, to get from the long tee to the short tee, if we just take a quick walk to our right, and we will see the short tee is just in front of us. The short tee does not have a view of the basket from the tee, but it is going to be off to the right of this main hallway. The short tee is 228 feet from here to the basket. It looks like I am not the only one that has hit this dead tree with the post here. So you can see dead tree, but there are marks all the way up this, and I added one somewhere up there. There is a gap that I have to move the disc left to right that I was originally aiming for. That gap is still there. I'm going to use a different disc, but here we can see how the results of it are going to be, because we can see the basket sort of through this gap between the brightly lit up tree on the right side and then the one next to it. Well, my discs are finding the base of the poles, so that's about 10 feet away. I don't know if you could see it from here, but the disc sort of rolled and curled around the basket itself, so hooray. And something else I just realized is there is actually a little arrow for the next tee on the white marker pointing off in the direction of the next tee. POV drop in for 3. Hooray, 2 pars so far, not too bad. Now, here we have, gonna wanna go in different directions depending on which tees we are playing. So here, if we go over, we can see the next tee sign on the basket. That goes to the long tees. However, if we look over the top of the basket and go over in this direction, we can see the bench just past the edge of the tufts that show the circle 1 around hole 2, and that is our tee pad for hole 3. It is the concrete tee pad, not the rubber mat there. To get from the basket of 2 to the tee for 3, as you're playing 2, you may be able to see this next tee sign right up here as we're walking up the fairway. And then just past that is the tee for hole 3. If it is busy, we're going to want to be a little bit careful here as we are walking towards the tee, so if there are people in front of you, just be aware of that. Hole 3 is a 486-foot par 4. We can see the short tees from here. If we look at the bench on the left edge of the fairway, about 100 feet off the tee, that is the short tee box. We cannot see the basket from here, but it's only because there's a bit of a hill that we're cresting and it's just enough to not be able to see it. There is a small gap in the cluster of trees on the right-hand side as we get to that larger cluster of trees up off in the fairway. The basket is actually through that gap. Now, that gap is maybe 3 feet wide, so I don't think it's something you're going to want to aim for, but it is a place where you can see the basket, and that's the direction you want to go. Also, there is out of bounds on the left up in the woods. There is a fence, and I would treat as going over that fence as out of bounds, but it's far enough left where it shouldn't be an issue unless you get real aggressive off the tee and have a really bad tree kick. But generally, we're going to want to get up through that gap as far up into what's sort of the obvious middle gap as we can, and the further we get up there, the better shot we will have at the basket. I'm left and kind of short of where I want to be, but I should still have a reasonable shot at a 4 from there. As we take a quick walk off the front of the tee, go up the fairway out into this nice open fairway area. If we look off to our left, we can see the nice concrete tee pad for the short tee for hole 3. Here we're on the left side of the fairway, just before the tree line, probably about 40 feet before the tree line, and we can see the basket here. It is brightly lit up by the sunshine just to the left of the big shrub that's there and off in the background. I am to the left of here, even further, so I'm a little pinched off. So again, this is going to require a little creativity to get close. And again, from here, we can see the out of bounds fencing off to the left, but again, it is way left from here. And I have a gap through the trees that I didn't think I had from there. Which that doesn't mean I can actually hit the gap. I am still to the left of the main fairway gap. The tree I hit was the one on the left just in front of us. I still have to hit that gap, but I'm a lot closer, and I have a straight open shot to the basket after that. So see how this works. That was not good. For my 4th shot, I have about 100 feet, so we got a long way to go. Something else I will note is that there is a long, steep drop-off behind the basket that leads down to a swamp. So this is definitely a death putt, and you could get a very long roll away here. If I go too far in the disc takes a bad roll, I could end up just as far away as I am now, except trying to go uphill through trees. That was super conservative. I still have a putt, but it's very makeable for 5 from there. We'll take our 6. Again, this is not the best hole for me, but that was me, not the play. Just to give a little bit better look of what's behind the basket here, the video doesn't really do justice how steep this is, but if we make it a little bit of the ways down here, it is possible if we get a bad roll for it just to roll all the way to the bottom of that, which again, that's probably 100 feet from the basket. It's not out of bounds, but you definitely don't want to be down there. To get from the basket of 3 to the tee of 4, if we look just sort of past and to the right of the basket, we have the very nice next tee sign there, as well as the arrow in the basket. And we can follow this little path here. This is a very well-defined path. So far, I've been very impressed with the pathfinding on this course. To get from the basket of one hole to the tee of the next, the signage has been very good and it's pretty obvious where you're supposed to go. The biggest issue that I've had so far has been on the course itself, largely due to the baskets that are blue. And because they're a dark blue, they are very difficult to see and pick out from where they are from the tee, even if you can see them from the tee. If we go a little further here and bear to the right, just in front of us, we have the tee for hole 4. I believe this is the short tee. And if we go just past this, we have the long tee for hole 4. U-disc lists the long tee for hole 4 at a 271-foot par 3. There is no long tee sign here. We are just to the left of the tee pad, just off the left edge, because though we cannot see the basket from here, the one thing that we can see from here is the tree that is off in the distance, that is rotting, that's about 20 feet off the ground. The basket is about 10 feet behind and to the right of that. So that's kind of the aim point there. From the long tee here, it's kind of a narrow gap. It's a little bit wider of a gap from where the short tee is and how that's angled. Off on the right, there's a very steep drop off. And though you're not going to lose a disc down there and it's not out of bounds, it's going to make for a miserable attempt to get back up to the basket if you do end up down there. There is a little bit of water down there, but it has been very wet here over the course of the last 2 months, and the water level is fairly high, and you have to go a long way to get to the point where you even have to think about getting disc from the running water there. So we'll see how this works. Hopefully I can make my corrections off the last couple of shots and get this one close. I popped that one up and it went way right, but I think that's far enough down there where it's not too far down the hill to the right. Most of the downhill off to the right stuff is earlier rather than late, so we'll see how I end up. Off to the right, looking down the hill, we can see it is, again, a long way downhill, but the further we get towards the basket, the less sloped it becomes. And because the hole itself is significantly downhill, we're not going to end up too far out. And yeah, I can see my disc from there. It's basically, not sure if we can see it from here, but I've got about a 40-foot putt from where I am and probably a clear shot. Here again, you can see that the further down we get, that we are basically right near this drop off. So here's a little bit of a marshy area here. And again, my suspicion is that in a month or so, this area that's kind of muck marsh will be mostly dry. I am going to have a little bit of a straddled putt here, but again, it's sort of middle of circle 2, and it's makeable from there. And I do have a clear gap if I have my foot on the, have my left foot where the disc is. Reasonable bit at my birdie putt, but drop in for 3, I will take that. Looking at the basket of 4 with the next tee sign pointing to the left and the swamp behind it, if we follow that sign to the left, we do have another one of these nice next tee signs on the tree and a very well-defined path to follow. Right. Here's the little brook that's sort of way off right that we don't have to worry about too much on hole 4. That's right there. Again, this is about as wet as you're going to see it. It was probably wetter a couple weeks ago, but it has been raining more or less for quite a while. And we can see if we look in the water here, it's actually fairly clear and not that deep. So worst case is you at least know where your disc went if you end up in this creek. But we will continue going past that. And just on the other side of this little area, we have another next tee sign past these pallets. Now, this is a bit of a walk between the holes. It's a very pleasant walk. Here we have another next tee sign. Here we have what I believe to be the long tee for hole 5. And if we go a little bit further here, past the long tee for hole 5, if we look to our right, we have the tee for hole 14. And if we continue down the path a little bit further, we have the next tee sign for hole 5. And here we have the short tee for hole 5. I will be playing the long tees. UDisc lists the long tees for hole 5 at 305 feet. It is significantly uphill. There is no tee sign here, but we can see the basket from the tee. It is straight ahead and straight up the side of the hill. So that's probably 25 vertical feet above where the tee pad is. So the idea here is going to be just get it as far up the hill as we can and hope we have a reasonable shot at getting in range for a par. Not that far and right, but I did make it a chunk of the way up the hill. So I've got probably 100 feet from where I am, but reasonable. In the fairway of hole 5, we do have this sort of marsh swamp area, but there are ways across it and it's not deep enough that you're going to lose a disc in here. You may get some squishy feet as a worst case scenario if you end up here, but there are a couple little paths across. There's one right through the middle here. There's also one around to the right, which I'm going to take because I'm further this way and can see my disc there. And we'll see what I have from here for my second shot. I do have a gap to get most of the way up the hill here. It is going to require a little creativity and hope that I don't bounce off one of those rocks or trees and roll all the way back down the hill. But I've at least got a gap that I can work with. I guess today is hit the base of the pole day. This is my approach shots are going well. Here we are looking back at the tee, and something we couldn't quite pick up from the tee is that this basket is actually on the top of a ledge. So if you go too far, you definitely have rollaway potential, not just short, but long as well. And if you go long, though the disc may get wet, again, it's not that deep. and you're not going to go too far into it, but you could get wet. And again, there's no out of bounds there, so just another challenge to this hole. I made my par putt here on hole 5. Now to get from the basket of 5 to the tee of 6, again, we do have two different options here. If we want to play the short tees, we go back down the hill and we follow, there's a path that goes around to the right. And if we are playing long tees, which I am, we'll stay up on the ridge here, follow this path, and we have the tee of hole 6 right in front of us here. Hole 6 is a 326-foot par 3, dogleg left, though most of the right to left bend happens right at the end. We cannot see the basket from the tee, however, it is in a line more or less between the gap of that cluster of 5 or so trees on the left edge of the fairway, and then that next larger single tree that's out in the fairway a little bit more. Again, the idea here is get as far down as you can. It does appear that there is a little bit of a brook and some marsh there, but again, this is fairly wet season, so my guess is later in the year that marshiness and river will be completely dry. So we'll see how I can do from here. Through there. Somehow I missed just about everything, and I got to kick back into the fairway, so I am just short of the little bridge. All right, here we are just short of the bridge, and I've got about 100 feet, but a clear look at the basket. So we'll see how this works out. You can see, again, the trees do open up quite a bit around here. The babbling brook next to us at this point is maybe 2 feet wide and maybe 6 inches deep at the deepest. So again, no risk of losing a disc in here. This is going to be a long putt for par from here, but makeable. It looks like it's just outside of, actually just inside of circle 1. I can see some of the little yellow tufts there. So this is about 30 feet. Short and left on my par putt, but drop in for 4. Here at the basket for 6, it looks like there are 2 options to get to the next tee signs. Both are marked on the basket. The short tee is if we go past that log and follow that around. That looks like it takes us up to the short tee. To get to the long tee for hole 7, here's the nice white sign saying 7 on the tree. We have a next tee sign over on our left. And we can continue to follow this path around. Again, these are very nice, well-defined trails. Even though this is a free-to-play course, it looks like there's a lot of maintenance that has been done and a lot of work has been gone on to keep up the course. And right up here, we have the T4 hole 7. Hole 7 is a 322-foot par 3, dogleg right. It does go quite a ways right. We cannot see the basket from the tee. However, it is 1 tree to the right of the most lit up tree. If we go in that direction, that's how far over to the right it is. Again, the main play is to go straight up through this gap and then go left to right. There is a river crossing, but again, I believe that's that same small brook as was on hole 6, so nothing to worry about, no chance of losing a disc in there. Get around there. Well, I didn't hear it hit anything, so though it's going to be right. Again, one nice thing about this course is that even if you go off, it doesn't look like you're too far off, and there's going to be some sort of scramble play to get to where you want, which that's kind of what I'm expecting here. To get to the short tees, if we go straight off the long tee and continue up sort of at the crest of the hill, if we look to our left, we can see the tee pad for the short tees is right over there. And if we had continued on that path from hole 6, That is the path that we walk up that sends us straight to the short tee for hole 7. One thing to note here is that after we get past sort of this second crest, the ground does drop away significantly. Oh, and it opens up significantly as well. So I am going to be somewhere way off here on the right, but I didn't hear it hit anything, so should not be that difficult to find. And now we can see the basket pretty much straight across that little bridge. Here we are in the middle of the fairway. I'm a good bit to the right of here, but I do have a clear shot at the basket. Again, as long as I can get something close, I should be in range to get a par from there. And putt to save par. That will take our 4 there. With our back to the creek at the basket of hole 7, if we continue past the basket and start going up this hill here, we have our next tee sign, which unfortunately looks like it was damaged, but you can tell this is what's supposed to be happening here. And up this hill and over the crest of the hill and start going down the hill the other side. We could see the tee of hole 8 from the tee of hole 6 if we wanted to take a look that way. Here we are at the tee for hole 8. Hole 8 is a 274-foot par 3, dogleg left. The basket is on top of the rocks off in the distance. We can see the basket. It is difficult to see, but it is on top of the last rock on the right before it starts going up steeper and having the bigger rocks on the left. The one thing we do need to be concerned about is we don't want to go way right, because if we go way right, we're going to end up in the river. And again, it's not a problem. You're not going to lose a disc there, but it's going to be difficult to get out of there for an additional shot, and you are going to end up wet. Not great, but it's safe and dry. To get to the short tee, we can just walk straight off the end of the long tee. And it is just up here on the right. And again, I'm pretty impressed that all of the short tees also have the nice concrete tee pads as well. And this gives you a good look as far as the brook and creek of you're going to be able to get your disc back out of there, but it's going to be obnoxious to do so. All right, looks like the play is super Anheuser forehand, and we'll see how this works out. I hit a tree I couldn't see from where I was throwing from. This gives a better idea of the green itself. There are multiple layers here. So again, the deal is if you can get to within 5 feet of the basket, that's ideal. But I think I'm just going to play something soft and lay up, because it's going to be a death roll away no matter what direction it goes here. That's the safe play for 4. To give, again, a little bit more context as to what's going on here, we have the river off to our right. Again, you're not going to lose a disc in there, but we have all of these rocks up here, and this is far steeper than it looks. That area around the basket is maybe 5 feet. This is going to be our putt for bogey. Yeah, even where I was about 10 feet out was close enough where I feel pretty confident from that distance. To get from the basket of 8 to the tee for 9, we go past the basket and sort of around to the left. There's a little bit of a path here. We have the next tee sign off that tree down there, but we can stay a little bit higher above ground here. And continue on this path here. And now if we get to this junction here, if we take a right, that is the short tee for hole 9. And if we turn around to the left and go up this hill, we have the long tee for hole 9. Again, you just want to be a little bit careful because we are going directly up the path that people will be throwing from here. Hole 9 is a 427-foot par 4. We can see the short tee directly in front of us. That's 110 feet away. It's 310 to the basket from that tee. The big obvious elephant in the room here is that we have the swamp in front of us, and we need to clear about 300 feet if we get to the other side of the swamp if we go straight ahead. If we go to the right, it's going to be shorter, but it makes for a much more difficult second shot. To the corner with that large pine tree straight ahead, dead in the middle of the fairway on top of the hill on the other side, that's where it makes a 90-degree right-hand turn, and you need to go right from there. There's no good way to get through the trees on the right side, so it's just kind of tossed out there and hope you make it across. But I'm expecting that my feet are going to be wet after playing this hole. Well, I got to skip out of the water, so I threw it so much into the ground and so short that I actually am not in terrible shape there for my second shot. So I am actually in a dry spot. I don't know how that happened, but I still do need to go quite a ways right. The basket's about 150 feet to the right after we get to that corner. So if I can make it a part of the way around the corner and get to within 100 feet with this shot, I will be thrilled. Not what I had in mind, but it went far enough that I should have a straight, clear shot at the basket from there. Here is the swamp, and again, there's some logs here. Again, to reiterate, this is about the wettest it's ever going to be here because of how much rain and wetness, and even so, it's not that deep. So again, it's not the risk of losing a disc, just more of a risk of lack of comfort. Here we are looking back at the tee. This is right at the elbow. There is one of the trees that's off in the distance, but if we turn to our right a little bit further, we can see the basket popping up over the hill in the distance. I'm short of here, but from here, I'd say it's probably about 150 feet. I've got a solid 200 to get there from where I am. Something to note about this basket is it is on a downslope. It's not going to cause an issue as far as rolling away too far or losing a disc, but you may end up with a 30-foot putt instead of a 15-foot putt if you go too far. Let's see if we can save par from there. No, but we'll take our 5. To get from the basket of 9 to the tee for 10, if we look straight ahead past the basket, now we have the main fairway coming in from our left, but we can see the short tee for hole 10 right up there. To get to the long tee, if we take this path on the right and follow this around, and we end up down here at the long tee for hole 10. Hole 10 is a 280-foot par 3, significantly uphill, dogleg right. The basket, we cannot see it from the tee, but it's roughly in line with the leftmost of the 2 trees that are on the right side of the fairway, and that's the line more or less where the basket is. To get there, we need to go straight and then right and uphill. There are a couple different gap options. The left gap is wider, or we can go through that narrow gap over the rock, and I'm going to go further left, and we'll see how we end up from there. I popped that straight up into the air and short. Here we are at the crest of the hill for hole 10. There's looking back at the long tee. If we pan a little bit to the right, we see that is looking back at the short tee. And we can see the basket for hole 9 in the background. And if we spin around, we can see the basket just to the right of that brightest tree. A tomahawk is an overhand throw with the disc held like this, that the objective is to try and make it through narrow tree gaps, and once it lands upside down, the disc will go from left to right, hopefully getting close to where you want it to go. All right, well, here's our proof that having an arsenal of weird shots is a good thing. I've got about a 25-foot putt to save par here after my tomahawk second shot through the trees. Pretty happy with that, with the second shot out of the brush. With the large rock right behind us at the green for hole 10, if we continue past, we can see the next tee sign up on the tree. And if we continue on this path, chipmunk. I have seen some squirrels and chipmunks out today, so this is the first, what I would call, warm spring day we've had so far this year. And here we have another next tee sign showing we're going in the right direction. Just past this, here we have the tee for hole 11. Hole 11 is a 292-foot par 3, straight ahead. We do crest a little bit of a hill, but there is a yellow sign off in the distance that is a out of bounds sign, that there's a rock wall just in front of that. Past the rock wall, long and to the right, is out of bounds, but the basket is basically directly under that yellow sign, straight off in the distance. And I popped it up yet again. To get to the short tee, if we go straight off of the long tee, just in front to the right is the short tee for hole 11. After trying to take down a tree with my first shot, my second shot, we can see the basket from here. Just top half of the basket is peeking up over the hill directly underneath the yellow sign. Again, we do not want to go long or right here because there is out of bounds at the property line, which is the rock wall. And another tree. And let's see what I can do with my third shot. See, hopefully I won't hit a tree with this one. No tree, and I almost dropped that in the basket. Just so you can see where the rock wall is, we are just past the basket here. There is this rock wall and there is line going here. So yes, this is going on to private property, so we do not want to go long here. Here's the basket. My disc is right at the base of it, so I'll pick this up, drop it in for my 4. There's our 4. To get to the tee for hole 12 with the rock wall to the left, if we follow along the edge of the rock wall and continue on, and that takes us right up here to the tee for hole 12. Hole 12 is a 630-foot par 5. It's a double dogleg. First, a slight bend to the right, which we can see in front of us going downhill, and then it takes about a 90-degree bend to the left. Ideally, we want to have a left to right shot that goes 250 to 300 or so to get us past that clump of trees. The clump of trees is thin, so if you end up short, you can cut off a little bit going there, but we really don't want to do that. And then it is a good ways up to the basket from there. There is out of bounds the rock wall to the left of the tee, and rock wall just past the basket is out of bounds. That is the property line. Just to give you an idea of what this fairway looks like, if we continue straight off the long tee and down the fairway, we will get to the short tee right in front of us. And right at the short tee is where it takes the slight bend to the right. And we can see that pointer tree, which we can see from the tree gives us a good mark of exactly where we want to be. And we can come down here a little bit farther. After my drive, I ended up right in the center of the fairway, right about here. And if we continue further, just up here is where it takes a 90-degree bend to the left. And we have this tree right in the middle that we need to avoid. And the straight path is actually over the side of this hill to get to the basket. And if we continue on a little bit further, we can see the rock wall off in the distance. And we can see the basket right next to the small tree just in front of the rock wall. Here we are at the right edge of the fairway, kind of looking around the corner. This is in line with where my disc is, right in the center of the fairway. So again, my idea here is just to try and get as far up the fairway as I can. As long as I'm in the fairway, it doesn't really matter left, right, where I am. I think actually the farther right I am, the better of a look I'll have at the basket. But as long as I make it past sort of that tree in the middle of the fairway, then I'll have a legitimate third shot. That should do just fine. I'm at the right edge of the fairway here. I do not have a clear shot to the basket, but I should at least be able to get close with a little creativity. I do have some trees to avoid, but if I can avoid those, I may have a shot at birdie from here. I was a lot more pinched off by a tree than I thought I was, but I have a long birdie putt from there anyway. As we get closer to the green, something else to notice is that the left side of the fairway, there is a pretty good hill there. So if you end up going left and the disc rolls at all, there is a reasonable chance it could roll back into the fairway. And even if it doesn't, the trees are not super dense up there. So scrambling is not going to be a huge problem from there. Now, the out of bounds rock wall, we can see that here. It's only about 10 feet behind the basket. It's also above the top of the basket. As long as we don't skip over the top of the basket and end up going out of bounds, this is really runnable from just about anywhere. I missed my birdie putt, but had a drop in for 5. To get from the basket of 12 to the tee of 13, with the rock wall behind the basket, if we turn to our right, there is a path over here, and we can see the next tee sign on the tree. And follow along this path. And just in front of us, we have the tee pad for hole 13. Hole 13 is a 505-foot par 4, severe dogleg left. The basket is so far off to the left we cannot see it. It's actually got more than 90 degrees of bend. It's more like 120. And I will say if that wall wasn't there, we'd want to try and cut off as much of the corner as we can. As it is, we want to go straight down this gap here and go from right to left. The further out we can get and the further left we can get, the better off we're going to be and the more it's going to open up the second shot. And that was going just the right direction it wanted to until it hit the tree. About 100 feet past the wall off the tee, there is a large rock, which is where we are now. From here, if we look in the small V-shaped gap, we can see the basket off in the distance. This is more than 90 degrees of dogleg. This is probably about 120 degrees of dogleg once we get up this far. But the way the trees and everything are shaped, the further that we can get out here, the better we are going to be. So ideally, if we get 270 moving right to left off the tee, we'll end up somewhere ahead and to the right of where we are. And just so we can see where the short tee is, if we turn to our right and look down, we can see the short tee just hiding past this rock, past the fence. So there's the rock that we were on. So there's the wall, and we can see the tee sign off in the distance. Here I am at the second large rock in the middle of the fairway, a little bit further up, just before the gully. Here we can see the basket. If we look at this smaller tree that's close to the camera, if we follow that just to the right, way off in the distance, we can see the basket through that little gap. I'm right on this little landing in front of the rock before the second rock. Again, I don't really have a great path to the basket from here, but I think right to left is the bigger gap, bigger option, more likely to get me closer. One other thing I will point out is that there is another rock wall that's out of bounds long here. And again, it looks like it's a good ways past the basket, so not too much to worry about, but just something to keep in mind when we get up close to the basket. Well, I changed my mind on that one about the direction just because I didn't like the angle that I had and how much right to left it was going to have to go. But at least, though I just made it to the other side of the gully barely, I at least have a shot at the basket from there. Here's a real benefit of why you want to be up here is because you can see the basket and it opens up significantly. It actually looks like going to the right, the trees are not that dense, so ending up further right is not terrible here. And again, here we can see the rock wall past the basket. It's probably 30 feet past, so we got a ways to go to get there. And I pulled that one badly. All right, looking around the green here, we can see that we have a relatively shallow rock wall. However, it is a solid 20 feet past the basket and more to the right as we're looking down the fairway. I ended up going way left. We'll see if I can make a circle 2 putt to save my bogey. At least I didn't leave it short. With the rock wall to our right, we can see the next tee sign up just past the rock wall on the right. If we go past the basket to get from the basket of 13 to the tee of 14, we can continue on this path. And we have a nice little bridge to go over here. And these paths, I will say, these are particularly well maintained. So I don't know if it's just they get used a lot because people are playing here a lot. I arrived here at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, so not a high traffic time of day, but there have been a few people that have come around and played since I started. We have the tee for hole 5. And if we remember when we said when we played the tee for hole 5, we had the tee for hole 14 just behind the tee for hole 5. So here we are. 14 is a 352-foot par 3, dead straight ahead. From here we're just in front of and to the left of the long tee. We can see the short tee just below the crest of the hill. This is about as straightforward of a shot as we've had so far today. So straight up the middle, avoid the trees, and see how far up the fairway we can get. Well, I was hoping that would get a more favorable tree kick, but may at least still have a shot at 3 from there. All right, let's see if I can get this one close for a shot at par. That's what I wanted to do. The green opens up quite a bit up here. Again, this is pretty much as basic, straightforward of a hole as we've seen so far. So we should have our POV drop in for 3. Maybe a little bit more than to drop in. To get to the next hole, there are 2 different options here. To go to the short tee, if you take a left, you can go down that small path, or if you're playing the long tee, you can go back down this path here and take a left up here. Just want to be a little bit careful of people who are throwing in the fairway. And here we are at the tee pad for hole 15. Hole 15 is a 337-foot par 3, significant dogleg right, and the basket is on the side of the hill across the creek. We'll show a little bit better of a picture when we get up there. We can see the short tee at the top of the hill just in front of us, but kind of the idea here is we want to get to the crest of the hill and then go a 45-degree angle as far to the right as we can possibly get. If you know exactly where to look, you can actually see the basket through the trees on the right of the tee. It is off screen to the right, but there's a small, what appears to be shelter or something that may have been used for a ropes course at one point just to the right of the tee. And if you look over that and off in the distance in the trees, you can see the basket. However, the chances of being able to see it later in the summer when all the leaves are out is quite slim. That may not have been the longest drive, but it had the right shape to it, so I'm pretty happy with that. From the short tee, we can see the basket on the side of the hill across the little creek there. This is a tough one to get and big risk of a rollaway back into the creek. Again, down here there is some marsh and wetness, but my guess is the later in the year we get, the more of this muck is just going to end up being dry. We have this nice little bridge to cross. There's also a log over there that it looks like we could cross if we need to, but I'm not quite that adventurous. I did see my disc did skip to the other side, and if we look in the river here, I guess there is a spot in the middle of this. It's probably 2 feet deep that may be a bit of a challenge to get at. But if we cross the bridge, go over to the other side, and go right over here. I am in that little cove right there, right along the water's edge. And that should be a makeable par putt. Hooray! It's good to know my putting game is still on. With the creek behind us, to get from the basket of 15 to the tee for 16, we want to go past the basket and up this path. Keyword here being up. We are going up quite a bit here. And just at the top of the crest of the hill, a couple things to note is that we are entering the fairway for 16, so we just want to be a little careful here. And if we look to our left and down, there are some switchbacks that we can use to get down to the fairway of 16. If we turn to our right from that little junction, we have the short tee for 16. And just past it, we have the long tee for 16. Hole 16 is a 270-foot par 3, significantly downhill, lots of water coming into play. There are 2 creeks. There's actually an intersection of 2 creeks, and we need to clear about 240 if we go in the right direction to get to the basket. Again, one thing to note here is that the water here is not that deep, but it's wide enough here in a couple places where and maybe a bit challenging to get at a disc. So I'm actually going to end up using a disc here that I normally would not, that I do not feel too bad about losing if it ends up in a spot where I can't get to it. Well, that was so bad, I think it ended up short of everything. To get to the fairway, we can go straight off past the short tee of 16. And we have these switchbacks here. And though it is a little steep, it's not what I would consider dangerous. If it's particularly wet or muddy, it may be a little bit of an issue, but again, not too big of a deal. And here we can get a little bit better look at the river and creek system set up. So basically there are two creeks that come together right under the bridge, and I am somewhere off to the left of here. I do have a gap I can get through here. We'll see whether or not this works out. I'd say that worked out pretty well. Now to get to the green, there's that nice bridge over there, which just looks like it gets us to that center island. But if we continue sort of off to the left of the direction that I was, this is the gap that I threw my disc through. And that's one that goes super overstable at the end. So it made the hard right turn just where I wanted it, and we have effectively a drop in for 3. And POV drop in for 3. There we go. Now, to get from the basket of 16 to the tee for 17, we actually do need to go across that little bridge. So if we cross over this bridge that gets us to that middle island, looks like there are little ramps here so they could get some sort of utility vehicle across here if they need to. And we take a left. Again, just take a gander up at the tee to make sure nobody's throwing at you as you're coming across this way, because we are kind of in a target zone. And we can go up this hill a little bit more. And here we have the long tee for hole 17. Hole 17 is a 541-foot par 4, significantly uphill, not just for this first shot, but the basket is about double the height of elevation as that first crest on the side of the hill off the tee. The short tee is just ahead of us to the left across the small bridge. In order to be safe of the water in the creek, we only need to clear about 175, so not that far to get past the water. And even if it does go in the water, all the water around here is relatively shallow. There's a couple spots where it may be 2 feet deep right along the edge, but you shouldn't be losing a disc in there. If you have distance, this is going to be a hole where it helps out a lot, because if you can get to the top of that first crest of the hill, you're going to be in much better shape for your second and third shots. I'm not sure how much I can overstate that this is really uphill a lot. Again, not just for the first shot that we can see here, but for the second shot as well. Also, the hill does go off to the left, and it may get a disc that rolls to the left, but it's not going to make it into the creek. And even if it does, it's just going to be right along the edge and not be too far in. It'll make for a difficult shot, but this is a very, very tough hole, it looks like. Again, to give you an idea of how steep that side of that hill was, where it hit, I could see the disc from where I was, even though you couldn't see what happened. But after it hit the ground, it slid down the hill about 4 feet after landing flat. So again, if I get a 5 here, I will be thrilled. Here we are at the crest of the hill, looking back at the tee. And if we spin around, we can move right just a little bit. Way off in the distance, not next to this first tree, but there are 2 trees just to the right of that. Between those 2 trees, off in the distance, is the basket. So we still have a long ways to go. I am still not quite here yet. After my second shot, it did not make it all the way up the hill yet. So
Unfortunately, I lost quite a bit of the footage on the second half of hole 17. However, it was mostly me playing in the woods on the right side. I ended up, after my 4th shot, in the shrubs on the right side ahead that we can see there. Here we're about 100 feet out from the green, and we can get a better look at where exactly the basket is tucked into the trees.
drop in for 6 to get to hole 18. If we take a right, and to get to the short tees, there's a path off in that direction that the short tees are just at the bottom of that. Or if we go further off to our right, over past these logs, we have the tee box for hole number 18. Hole 18 is a 520-foot par 4. Straight ahead, there's a slight dogleg right at the very beginning to get down this hallway we're looking at on the right side. And then there's a slight dogleg left on the second shot to get to the basket. We can see the short tees at the bottom of this little gully off to the left. And we'll see how we can do from here. That is way left, but still playable. Something that's a bit of an optical illusion here is that this fence from the tee looks perpendicular, but actually it's more at about a 30-degree angle. So if you're standing on the tee, the further right you go on the wall, the further up the fairway it is. I am to the left of here in the woods, so we'll see how my second shot goes. I had a couple branches I had to get under there, so in the middle of the fairway in 2. All right, we're almost in line with the end of the fence here, and we have a clear shot at the basket for the first time. It is pretty open. We just have that 1 tree to miss, which inevitably means I will probably clobber it, but we'll see if we can get close from there. I popped it up, so that's going to be a long putt for 4 from there. Well, it's long, but makeable. That needed a little bit more anhyzer on it, but was close. Ended up with a bogey 5 here, which not too upset with at the end of the day. With our back to the tee, if we want to keep going and have some more fun, if we take a right, we have a pad there, and that is the short tee pad for hole 1. Or if we continue out in this direction towards this large empty expanse of concrete, that is where we started. So that is the lost disc drop box, and we have the tee for hole 1 just past that. And if we turn to our left, we have the parking lot. So we are back to where we started.
This course is well maintained, and it did appear that there were some minor issues being addressed, including some work on the path from the hole 4 basket to the hole 5 tee, and on the fairway of hole 9 to reduce the amount that you need to walk through the marshy areas. The thumbnail for this video is the approach to the green on hole 16, where you have to clear the creeks to get to the basket. This gives a good idea of the creek that wanders through the property and gives a good idea of what many of the greens are like, with some scattered trees to avoid, but that are avoidable with an accurate throw. My favorite hole is hole 12. There aren't many par 5s on courses in New Hampshire, and even fewer that are birdieable for players like me, whose game relies on accuracy more than distance. At 630 feet, it is short for a par 5, but requires 2 excellent shots and 1 good shot to get in birdie range. Honorable mentions go to holes 2, 3, 5, 6, 15, and 16. There are a lot of well-designed holes that do an excellent job of using the natural features of the property here. My least favorite hole is hole 13. It's a 505-foot par 4. However, with the sharp dog leg and with how early it happens in the hole, a par is an excellent score here. With a good drive, you're still looking at over 300 feet with no clear gap through the trees to get to the basket, and in most cases, no view of the basket. Removing the wall and cleaning up some of the brush to create a second, narrower gap off the tee to the left would shorten the second shot by a significant margin and would more severely punish missing the gap. Dishonorable mentions go to hole 9, requiring a long, nearly perfectly placed tee shot to have a clear shot to the basket on your second shot, and hole 17, which for a noodle arm like myself and the hole being so steeply uphill, with significant rollaway potential on both of the first two shots, makes a bogey 5 feel like the best I could hope for here. Hole 17 could possibly be turned into a par 5 if the property lines allow by either pushing the tee pad back a bit or by pushing the basket 75 to 100 feet further left and tucking the basket behind a cluster of trees, or both. The first and last holes are critical for introducing the course and leaving the last impression at the end of the round. Hole 1 does a good job of easing you into the course, letting you know what a lot of this course is about, a tree-lined dogleg that you can't see the basket from the tee on. Hole 18 is also a good hole to end the round on. After the most difficult hole on the course, where UDisc states that hole 17 plays 1.19 shots over par, hole 18 is a much more traditional par 4 that feels fair and reminds you what a lot of the rest of the course is like, with some options of exactly how to play it. Hole 18 does make me want to come back and play this course again, provided that I do well enough here to erase the brutality of hole 17. Course navigation here was easy most of the time. Between the arrows on the baskets pointing to the next tee, the directions to the next tee given on the informative tee signs, and the well-marked pathways to the next tee along the way. The only place I had any issue with course navigation between holes was convincing myself that I really did need to go up the steep hill going from the basket of 15 to the tee of 16. There are a few holes that it was difficult to determine exactly where the basket is or where your tee shot should end up, notably on holes 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, and 17. However, with most of these, if you pick the main gap and go for it, you'll end up in close to the right place. There are a lot of blind shots on this course. Navigating this course was like making an egg salad sandwich from scratch. Most of it is easy, and the overall framework is simple enough that you don't really have to think about it, but there are a few internal details that are quite difficult when you remember that from scratch includes making the egg salad and making the bread. This course is moderately safe for discs. Most of the places where you could lose a disc, it is obvious enough that you know it is a possibility before you throw, such as a bad tree kick right early on hole 4, right into the creek on hole 8, or into one of the creeks on holes 15 or 16. The only throw that this affected my disc choice on was hole 16, where I threw a disc that I would not be upset if I lost. The tee pads were all excellent, not just for the long tees, but the short tees as well. This is one of the few courses I've been to where both long tee pads and the short tee pads have been of equal quality. The tee signs are also very good, with the one exception being that I would like to see elevation change from tee to basket. This would significantly help with navigation on several holes, knowing whether to look up, down, or for flat ground. All of the baskets are DGA Mach 10 baskets. The single biggest complaint that I have about the entire course is that these baskets are painted dark blue and are extraordinarily difficult to see, not just in the video, but in person as well. The baskets themselves are good and they catch the disc well, however, having them in a color that is easy to see from far away would make playing this course for the first time a better experience. That said, if the biggest complaint that I have about the course is the color of the baskets, you know that it's a well-designed course. This is a good course for intermediate to expert disc golfers. Though even from the short tees it's not the best for a complete beginner, there is enough variety to challenge intermediate disc golfers without being overly intimidating, and a few holes where having the ability to throw 400 feet through narrow gaps will significantly be rewarded on your scorecard. My overall course rating is that I would be willing to drive 2.5 hours out of my way to play this course for the first time, and 1.5 hours to play this course again. This course was ranked number 5 in New Hampshire in 2024, and the quality of the course does warrant its top 5 status. As far as nearby courses go, the only other course that I've played that is within a half hour of Squamanagonic is that I once played Bellamy Falls, and that was about 15 years ago, so I'm not sure how valid of a comparison that would be. It is likely that I will play this course again at some point, as I would like to see how dry the course ends up being when there has been more typical rainfall. Like, share, and subscribe, and post in the comments how many times I mispronounced Squamanagonic in the playthrough of the course. Check out my other video linked here, or the playlist of my disc golf courses of New Hampshire linked in the description.